Welcome to the Tech and Space Leader Show, where we learn lessons from leaders of the next frontier. I am your host, Lisa Dreher, and I'm really excited to introduce our guest for today, Karl Stedman. He is the founder and CEO of Pulse Space. Welcome to the show, Karl.
Thank you for having me, Lisa.
Absolutely. Thank you for making time for this amongst all of the other things you have going on. And I'm sure we'll touch on a lot of those things. But maybe we can start by having you give a little bit of background on yourself and Pulse Space.
Okay. Well, I'm a self-taught entrepreneur. I've been through hell to get where I'm at. It's been a crazy journey. I have a book deal about my life that will be coming out once things settle down a little bit later. And Pulse, more importantly, is a remote power network in space. And we are essentially a utility company that gathers solar power, converts it into laser energy, and transmits that energy using lasers down to altitudes where it's important. Um, and a side benefit is anything that intersects our beams will be able to get high fidelity data on. So it also acts as a giant scanning system for space situational awareness and debris tracking.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a lot. So maybe explain in, I guess, very simple layman's terms, what does this mean for the space industry and how is that, I guess, changing the way we are doing things now or will do them in the future?
Okay. There's two aspects to it. First is the power side of the equation. Because we control the wavelengths that we're transmitting, and then also the receiver's optimization of those wavelengths, it allows for a lot higher energy density in a smaller form factor. So our Gen 1 power platform will be able to produce 19.3 kilowatts at a distance of 1,000 kilometers on a 3 meter surface area, which is about one ninth the size of a solar array with the same power output. And that changes the game because instead of having power fluctuations as you wrap around Earth and go in between the Earth and the sun, so you're in Earth's shadow, you'll be able to use your max power on your bus 24/7. And that fundamentally changes the revenue dynamic of space operators. And then to the space situational awareness side, right now, SSA companies have a hard time seeing anything smaller than like a softball. They can go down to 5 centimeters, but that is dependent on weather because it's usually Earth based observation. And by having our platforms in space using these large lasers constantly swiping across the sky, we'll be able to see the 1 to 10 centimeter debris constantly, build a really high fidelity model. And then as we ramp up our power levels, we'll actually be able to apply radiation pressure to those debris and push them either out of the orbit they're in so they don't run into things or drop them into Earth's atmosphere where they can burn up.
Wow. Okay. So I heard that you are participating in the TechStars Space Accelerator for the
Yes.
fall class of 2024. So tell us how that is working out for you and how things have been going so far.
Uh, yeah, absolutely. So first off, it's crazy, super fast paced. I've been on the road 7 out of the last 8 weeks, LA, all over the country. And secondly, I want to shout out to Matt and the team over at Techstars. They're awesome. So if you're a space company that's looking to join, absolutely do it. The reasons why we decided to join Techstars are twofold, with a little third. First and foremost, we needed to plot a path into partnering with the DoD, and we didn't know where or how to start. Since then, since we've joined, it's been very, very fast paced, and we have a path and we're actively walking it. Secondarily, we wanted to improve our momentum on our raise, which is also happening very quickly. And then last, because I'm self-taught and I've been through again hell to get to where I'm at, I've learned the hard way on how to do stuff. It doesn't necessarily lend itself to industry best practices, so that's another facet that we wanted to improve on a little bit by joining Techstars.
Wow, great. And that's going really well.
Yes, yeah, it's
Excellent.
been it's been an amazing experience so far. A lot of traveling, but absolutely fun and just the team. Like I can't stress this enough. The team at Techstars Space in LA is amazing.
Excellent. Wow, fantastic. So let's jump a little bit back into the technology again. And can you talk a little bit about why on-demand power in orbit is so important?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll equate it back to power down here on Earth. So before we had distributed grids, you had to run your own little generator, if you will, in your house, and it wasn't reliable electricity. Since we had since we created distributed grids and everyone had access to power, we've gone through the industrial revolution. We've literally created these systems where we just plug in appliances or whatever we want into the wall, and we assume power is going to be there. So it's really transformative. But for the last 60 years, kind of like before grids down here on Earth, in space, everything had a solar array, which means that you are inherently limited by the power that that array can generate. You're limited by being in Earth's shadows. There's a bunch of drawbacks on it. It's heavy, it's big, doesn't scale very well. So, by having a distributed power grid around the Earth, we're essentially providing that functionality for future space operators to be able to plug in their hardware and get the power they need when they need it.
Wow. Okay. That's really, really exciting. So maybe explain a little bit about, I guess, what is required from your end in order to provide this on-demand power.
So, a lot. It's highly technical. We need to have great stability in our platforms because, as you can imagine, when you transmit long distances, any sort of wobble in the platform itself will cause the beam to go way off course. So that's first and foremost. We need to be able to radiate heat really, really well, which in the space environment is quite honestly very tough because you're basically limited to 400 watts per square meter facing black space. Now, the reason why that's important is because high energy lasers, regardless of how efficient they are, they generate a lot of heat. And if the heat has nowhere to go, then we have a big issue. Our platforms shut down, etc. That applies to all satellites. And then, last but not least, is making sure our wavelengths are optimized for our receivers, and targeting and tracking and being very finite with where it's going so it doesn't just go into places we don't want it to, if you will. Um, Good thing about it is I'm surrounded by extremely intelligent individuals, and our team is pretty dedicated on going out and making this a reality. And we're expecting to have our first demo in space in about 11 months now.
Wow. Okay, that is really exciting. So, I mean, that's right around the corner, really.
Yeah.
In our opener, you talked a little bit about space situational awareness. So, how will what Pulse Space is doing really, I guess, change on orbit operations?
So first off, right now there is a large portion of the industry that just ignores small debris. So when you have an anomaly on your star or on your spacecraft, you don't actually know what caused it. It just turns into an anomaly in your systems. And our premise is that a lot of those are probably caused by micro debris, causing impacts, vaporizing aluminum, vaporizing some of the bus, and causing havoc within the actual sat buses. Now, being able to see down to 1 centimeters and potentially lower, depending on the distance from our optics, we'll be able to model that those debris objects way better, which means that we can avoid them first and foremost. But secondarily, as we ramp up power levels, we can redirect those debris out of harm's way. So we're initially going to focus on the very high valuable altitudes and try to clean up um, those orbits so they don't have impacts from debris. Now it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a lot of time. It's probably going to take a lot of players to do so because space is so vast. But as we add mass to orbit, the amount of debris is actually going to continue to increase. Humans are not very clean creatures, and that applies up in space as well. So we actually look at this service more as, say, an equivalent of taking out the trash and being a trash collector down here on Earth, where it's continuous. It's an ongoing job that's going to require ongoing um, actions in order to remediate the situation. We want to get it to a point where it's safe and it drops the barriers of entry into operating in space substantially. And that's what we're going after.
Excellent. Okay. Well, that's very, very exciting. What role have partnerships played in the development of Pulse Space?
Very important. Obviously, we can't provide power to other companies without those partnerships. We'd just be providing power to ourselves. Secondarily, the development side's actually been primarily internally, but we've had companies and individuals specifically that get really excited about giant space lasers, and they've helped push the needle forward. So there's actually a couple partnerships we're getting ready to announce publicly. We've signed a couple contracts on top of that, so there's some good things coming.
Wow, excellent. That's very exciting. So, you talked a little bit about the technology and how it works. Can you talk about some, and also, kind of the whole situational awareness piece? Are there other use cases for this technology that we haven't already talked about?
Yeah, there is definitely DoD use cases. We don't typically talk about those. There is small scale ablation on debris as well, rather than just using radiation pressure. Um, but at the end of the day, this system is not just useful around the Earth. We're power agnostic. So right now we're using solar, but when nuclear becomes available at a cost efficient standpoint, we will switch over to nuclear, which means that systems like this, having wireless transmission of power, work around the moon, they work around Mars, any place with low atmosphere, essentially. Um, Mars will be a little bit more difficult simply because it does have an atmosphere, just not a lot. But anywhere where there is distributed architecture, and nuclear power sources, we can provide power to, so the individuals or the operators don't need to focus on their power sources. They can focus on what they're good at. And just like operating a business down here on Earth, optimize for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that will be fascinating to watch as that comes to pass.
Yeah.
So, I want to end with one last question, and that is if you could make one prediction about the future of space situational awareness, what would it be?
So if I had to make one prediction, it would be that we're never going to get rid of all debris around Earth, especially when you start factoring in conflicts. It's actually going to get worse before it's going to get better. The Russians have blown up now two satellites, I believe, using anti satellite technology, which spreads debris. When you couple that with everything else we've already put up there, and the fact that we're adding a lot more mass every single year, it's just going to get worse before it gets better. But companies like Pulse and a few others will work diligently to help clean it up. But it's going to be an ongoing process. Like it will be a trash collection services. There is no other alternative unless we're absolutely perfect on not creating debris. And again, human beings aren't very clean at all. It just kind of happens. We kind of impact our environments wherever we go. So if I had to make a prediction, it will actually be space situational awareness and debris remediation will ultimately become one of the larger near Earth industries.
Wow. Okay, so that's interesting. And now you're getting my interest on this topic. So let me ask you a follow-on question to that, which is, I think the challenge for space debris removal up until this point has been kind of who's going to pay for this.
Mhm.
So how do you see the financial end of this working in a way that it does become a significant in part of the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. There's two facets to that. First and foremost is what are the alternatives? What are the alternatives to cleaning it up? Making more debris, eventually making it to the point where you can't operate in space if we take it out to the logical conclusion, which serves no one. Secondarily, the way we're thinking about it is providing it as a service at a lower cost than the expulsion of propellant in order to change orbits for that operator. So by providing something that is less costly, an alternative to moving, we should be able to attract private companies to pay for debris service on demand. And that's where we're going eventually. It's not here yet, but that marketplace is starting to get created.
Yeah. Do you think there's a role? I mean, obviously, I guess that regulatory is going to play in this
Oh, yeah,
ultimately. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. But it's going to take catalysts. It's going to take time before that actually gets put in place. So we'll see where it goes. We want to be ahead of the curve rather than behind. So
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so if somebody wanted to learn more about Pulse Space, what should they do?
first off, head over to pulsespace.com. That's the easiest way. And then you could also find us on LinkedIn. And we actually got some pretty awesome swag. We're leaning into the whole Dr. Evil and Austin Powers themes. So giant space lasers and sharks and all that stuff. So you can rock our swag too.
All right, very cool. Thank you so much, Carl, for being here today. We really appreciate it. We would love to have you back on as Pulse Space gets into space, and yeah, so we welcome you back in the future.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I do want to take a moment to thank GuideForce for hosting these sessions. To learn more about GuideForce, you can visit guideforce.com. And we'll see you the next time on the Tech and Space Leader Show.